I'm Melanie Abrams, and this is the whole truth on reopening schools. There seem to be a lot of experts out there telling America how to handle the reopening of schools amidst an increase in COVID-19 cases. We've talked a lot about the kids. Can the kids get it? Are the kids really in danger? Should we sacrifice 1% of our kids to the virus so that other kids can bully each other and learn the Pythagorean theorem? Really quickly, no, we should not sacrifice any kids in the name of socialization, given that there are many cases in which kids have had little to no symptoms and then had inflammatory heart failure months later. And even if kids aren't negatively affected by the virus, their grandparents and parents and babysitters and neighbors and siblings might be, and kids are walking contamination zones. But the kids aren't even what I want to talk about here. It's the other people in the school. You know, the teachers, school nurses, staff, bus drivers, substitutes. Let's go through a few scenarios here. Say a teacher tests positive. Does that teacher quarantine for 14 days? Are they required to teach remotely from quarantine? Do the kids still come into class or do they learn from home for those 2 weeks? And for the teacher, are those sick days? Who pays for those sick days? And wouldn't that then require every student that they came into contact with to quarantine? What about if a teacher has a kid? Will all of that kid's peers and teachers have to quarantine too? What about the other teachers the sick teacher came into contact with? Do they quarantine? How about their students? Let's also think about high school teachers and college professors who have upwards of 150 students because they swap classes. Now you're talking about the virus being taken from class to class, teacher to teacher. So if one person in the school has it, does the entire school quarantine? Does the entire school get tested? Who pays for that testing? What if someone has no insurance or a family member who's against testing? What if a teacher lives with someone who tests positive? Do they have to move into separate housing in order to continue teaching? And if so, who pays for that? And what about a substitute teacher? How are you supposed to find a substitute who is willing to work in a classroom full of COVID-exposed kids for $13 an hour? And what if the substitute contracts COVID? They bounce from school to school, class to class. Do 4 or 5 schools that they taught in that week close down completely? And guess what? Half the people working in a school aren't teachers. What about kids who take the bus to school? Do we expect low-paid bus drivers to willingly shut themselves in an enclosed space with a bunch of kids who could have been exposed? And what about school nurses? Have we planned who is paying for their full hazmat suits and PPE and limitless supply of disposable thermometers, gloves, and alcohol wipes so they can take your kid's temperature when they feel sick at school? What about the minimum wage cafeteria workers who have no choice but to stand a foot apart from your kid to help it get lunch from a cafeteria line where hundreds of other kids have been breathing on the food? And what if the person making your kid's food is sick? Has anyone suggested a plan for contact tracing in teachers and school staff? According to contact tracing education, if a teacher becomes sick, you'll have to isolate the teacher, quarantine the students, and depending on the type of school, most likely the entire building. The average American school has 528 enrolled students, and for high school that goes up to 752. So let's average that out at 640. Let's look at Miami-Dade County as an example. There are 392 public schools just in Miami-Dade County. The average American family has 3.14 persons per household. So 392 schools times an average of 640 students per school times the average size of their family at home is 250,880 people mixing their germs around together with irresponsible children as the germs chauffeurs. And that doesn't even touch the number of teachers and staff and their families. And we have no federal mask mandate, no nationwide free coronavirus or antibody testing, no free mask plans, no contact tracing plans, no free PPE for teachers or nurses planned, nothing. We have no plans. We aren't ready. Some school districts are discussing staggering schedules so that only half the kids are in school at a time. That also doesn't make sense. There aren't enough teachers or funding to double teaching staff. So if one kid in group A tests positive, the teacher who was exposed to that kid is also teaching group B, and vice versa. That plan is essentially just making 2 smaller schools in the same building, not eliminating the potential for infection. And if the kids are learning from home half the week anyway, that isn't back to normal. What's the point of risking their lives? Look, of course kids should be with other kids playing and learning and doing what kids do, and I'm sure most of you are tired of taking care of your kids all day. Just imagine how their teacher feels. But the questions I just posed have no answers yet. We still don't know enough about how this virus works, and our politicians are still failing to make any hard and fast plans to put an end to this. We can't just throw people into a closed building and tell them to take care of our kids or else lose their careers and livelihoods. And we have actual proof about how this will work, as multiple summer camps have closed down due to outbreaks among campers and camping staff. Most recently, a camp in Missouri closed because of 82 cases. We already know how this is going to go. Do you really expect your kid's teacher to be responsible for making sure your kid and all of the other kids are wearing their mask? Do you give permission for them to physically force a mask onto your kid? How are they supposed to keep high school kids from making out after school? How are they supposed to be sure your child is washing their hands when they use the restroom? Are teachers supposed to accompany your kid to the restroom and throw soap and water at them? Are you trying to get teachers killed? School shootings happen, and we expect teachers to become armed generals. A pandemic happens, and we expect them to be medical professionals. And no one is even talking about a pay raise. Honestly, I'm disgusted at the way so many people are discussing what the kids need without a thought to what teachers need. How about, instead of asking frat boys turned news anchors or lawyers turned politicians how we should handle school reopenings, we ask teachers and doctors. You may think it won't be your kid or your kid's teacher, but it will be someone's kid. It will be someone's teacher. It is a statistical guarantee that opening schools will kill some people. It could be your kid. It could be your kid's teacher. It could be both. We don't know yet. Are you really selfish enough to find out? If you can listen to this video and still think schools should reopen without having a concrete plan in place, you are delusional. You're risking the lives of children and school workers, and you will be complicit in the willful negligence that our government will have to answer for when schools have to shut down again because too many people have died. And that's the truth. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WholeTruthTV and click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell because we've got the whole truth on the things that matter to you coming up for you soon.